One Question is designed to give subscribers valuable insights on how executive leaders in college athletics think about key issues on their respective campuses, in their departments, or within their leagues and conferences.
Greetings, this is Ty Brown and welcome to One Question, where we highlight executive leaders in college athletics. Our guest today is Mark Jackson. Mark is currently the Director of Athletics at Villanova University. Greetings, Mark. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure, Ty. Thanks for having me on.
Now, Mark, you've been at Villanova for 3 years, seen a lot of success. Of course, 3 years in a leadership position is kind of the culmination of a number of years working with a number of leaders. And one of the things that I've heard you talk about over the years is these people who you've worked for, from Pete Caroll to Bill Belichick to a number of different people, they all knew who they were. This process of understanding who you are will help you in leadership. You call it self-discovery, right? The self-discovery is a process of acquiring insight into one's own character. Mm-hmm. But I like the way you define it. Can you give us your definition of self-discovery?
Yeah, I think for me, it's competing with myself to find the quiet time to do the lonely work. And that's hard to do today, to truly unplug, find those quiet moments in our life where it takes some time to ask yourself difficult questions about the type of leader I am, whether that as a husband, as a father, as an athletic director, as a friend. I think those moments are few and far between. So you have to compete with yourself to find it, especially if you're in a position of leadership. You have to be authentic, right? And we've all been around great leaders, and I've been fortunate to be around Hall of Fame coaches and great leaders in sports. And for a long time, I'd let each one of those influence my own philosophy, maybe too much. One day I'd want to be more like Pete Caroll, and then one day I'd probably want to be more like Bill Belichick or Parcells or Boeheim or the coaches that I had been around. And it wasn't until I had to figure out me. What kind of leader did I want to be? Now those influences are great, and they certainly shape and influence me. But it wasn't until I took the quiet time to really dive in, and I wrote this huge affirmation in the written word. I think we have a lot of thoughts in our heads, but until you write them down, they don't become real.
Right. And so talking about that process of self-discovery for you, I don't know what question to ask first here. Like, how long did it take, or what specifically was the process that you went through, in your career that got you to where you are now in terms of understanding yourself? Yeah,
and let me say, it took me a long time to do it. And Pete Carroll's my greatest mentor in my entire career. He'd ask me every year. We worked together probably 6 or 7 years straight at USC over this great run of success, and he'd ask me every summer, did you do your lonely work? Did you sit down and start to figure yourself out? And coach, I'll get to it. I never did it. So finally, after a while, I took the time, and it started with what's the most important thing to me in my world as a priority. And that started with me as a husband. So, what kind of husband do you want to be? Do you want to be one that's present? Do you want to be one that has balance? And I asked myself all those questions, and I wrote the answers to those, and fortunately I realized I have a wife that understands the business that I'm in and understands the crazy hours and events and all that kind of stuff. So I'm very fortunate. And then the next question, what kind of dad do I want to be? What kind of son do I want to be? And then finally it got down to, all right, well, do I want to, is it a head coaching thing? Is it a GM position? Is it athletic director, being on a college campus? Is it something in the private end of sports world and business? And those are some really hard questions in there, and it kept pointing back towards being on a college campus and being an athletic director. And that's that was an important crossroads for me, because I wasn't sure for the first 10 years of my career which direction it was going to go.
I'd imagine that after you went through that process, and then you went back and thought about the leaders that you worked with or worked for, you probably came to understand, these people operated from the baselining of knowing who they are. You going through it helps you look back and seeing what helped those people to success.
No doubt. It's authenticity, Todd. That's the key. You have to be true to yourself. And like I said, I early on, I'd read a book and I'd change the way that I think. It didn't have to be that I was working with somebody. Now, they can all, like I said, they can impact and influence, but until you really zero in about you, yeah, I don't think you have a chance. And I think if you were to talk to members of Pete's organization or of Bill Belichick's organization, they can tell you specifically what's important to those guys, what makes those guys tick, and how consistent they are. And I want the same thing for our athletic department. I want people to know, our culture and our philosophy and how it's reflective of the leader that I am.
Right. Is that easy to see when you talk about people within your own organization? Like, how quick can you see that from an interview, from talking to other people? That kind of thing?
That's a really good question. I'd like to think that it's working. I'd like to think that it's really reflective of me, but I don't think it's until you talk to people that work there, the head coaches and our staff and our campus community, to know, whether or not it's legit. I know this. My leadership philosophy focuses on 4 F's, right? It's family, faith, friendship, and fun. And I would hope that in those kinds of conversations and questions that those 4 words would come up in terms of the culture of our athletic department. I'd hope you would hear that from a lot of our staff members.
Well, you've been successful there. I'm pretty sure something's working there. What about when you're looking at a potential hire? Now that you've gone through your process and you're in it, it's running. Do you have a filter now? Like, this person knows who they are, and this would be a great person for our organ. Like, is that?
It's a really good question, and for me, like I said, I don't need somebody that has to mirror my philosophy or our culture. I think there have to be some things that are reflective of it, but it doesn't have to mirror it, if that makes sense. There's wiggle room, but if you're going to interview, whether you're a head coach or an administrative staff member in our department, that's the first question I'm going to ask you is, do you have a leadership philosophy? And the answer is always yes. Can you tell it to me in 2 minutes or less? Are you that sure about it? Are you that confident about it that you know yourself well enough that you can, in 2 minutes, can you sum up what you're about? And inevitably the answer is yes. And then 20 minutes later, they're done telling me about their leadership plot. And that is telling to me that they haven't given it the thought. And I don't fault them. It took me 10 years to figure that out, and finally sit down and do the lonely work. But that's the question. I've given my interview secret away, but that's the first question I ask. And for me, if you were to ask me that question, it's about, my family, my faith, friendships, and fun. And I could talk for 2 hours about it, but that's what this department's going to be reflective of. And I know that because I've done the lonely work.
Right. Well, I want to know if you have advice for young people working in sports that want to work in sports, even some people who are veterans and been in the game a long time, and really any industry. Mm-hmm. How can people figure out a process that actually works for them? And you mentioned yours was, the lonely work, you writing it down, words of affirmation helps you to process and see where you want to go and who you are and what direction you're going. And, it may not work for everybody, but do you have advice for somebody that is trying to figure out a process?
Yeah, Ty, for me, the one thing I was clear about, the one thing I knew from the time I took my first internship with the Patriots, my junior year of college, I knew for sure that sports connected to my passion. That's what I wanted to do the rest of my life. Okay, right. That at least I figured that out. And I have this conversation a lot with both students and student athletes. I go to that Sunday night feeling. I ask them this: if you could close your eyes and on Sunday night and wake up Monday morning and do anything you would want in the world, like what's tugging at you, what's pulling at you, if you can zero in to start there, because I think that's what you're passionate about. If you're waking up Monday morning and you're kind of dreading going wherever you're going, you're not connected to your passion. So that's where it starts. And for, I think a lot of people, sports triggers that. Like, oh yeah, I can imagine sports. I've played sports my whole life. I've been around this, and I can see that. Okay, that's great. You're connected to your passion, a lot like I was at 24. But it took me 3 years of coaching, realizing that at the end of it, coaching is not for me. I did not want to watch film on Tuesday night until 2 a.m, or I didn't want to do statistics and all that. Okay, that took me 3 years to figure out. And then I went, front office with the Raiders, and I realized, that this NFL thing is a little bit too isolated for me. So there was a lot of experiences that led towards picking a particular vertical. I think the earlier that you can start that process, and especially in the sports world, I think there's 3 verticals, right? In my mind, there's either the collegiate world, the professional world, or there's the private world of sports, and there's a lot that goes into that, right? On the business side or the charitable side, whatever, marketing, you name it.
Right.
And I think for those wanting to start a career in sports, I think you got to start asking those questions sooner rather than later. And only, it's individualized. Again, it goes back to what you're about. For me, raising my kids on a college campus there was tremendous value in that. The inclusive nature of a college campus versus the isolated world of the NFL, that took me a long time to figure out, but I impart that knowledge on people that ask, because I don't think it's changed all that much. The NFL isn't a place where you're going to be doing fundraising events on weekends and recruiting events on weekends where your wives and kids and all that. It's just not that world, So that was really important to me, and it resonated with me. But that's going to be different for everybody.
It is. I can relate to that. I worked for the American Football Coaches Association for 13 years, and it began because I wanted to be close to the game.
Right.
And then I started thinking maybe I want to coach football. But as I worked there for that almost 15 years, I saw that it wasn't necessarily the X's and O's that I was enamored with. I actually fell in love with the organizational leadership of coaches having to get everybody to go in the same direction. Like that, I love that. And so that's kind of where I am now, right? This is why we're talking on the phone.
Yeah, and there you go.
Talking in this podcast.
And if there was a way to expedite that process and kind of get to the core of what you're about quicker, I guess that's what we're talking about. Maybe it's, conversations you would have had with people, or gone and shadowed somebody somewhere, just to kind of open your eyes up to what you were truly passionate about and where you saw yourself going.
All right. I have one final question for you. Have you ever been around someone who's in an influential position, and maybe they've been in that position for a while, but you can tell that they haven't been through that self-discovery process, and you probably had to pull them aside to give them some advice on something? You ever been in that situation?
Yeah, no, I have, and I don't want to pretend like I have all the answers.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Because, I vary off course too, right? I like to think my 4Fs guide me every day, but there are times you can ask my wife or my kids that I get way off, and I gotta get rechecked. So I see it a lot in coaching, because I think coaching poses so many different challenges at different points. Where are you the same coach when you're having a winning season that you are having a losing season? Are you the same coach when you're dealing with a high maintenance group of parents versus a low maintenance group of parents? And I see a lot of inconsistencies there where, like I said, one day a coach may take a Nick Saban approach, and then another day, when things are going well, they take a Pete Carroll approach. And I think that's dangerous. You have to be you, so that, that there's a consistency that people recognize. And it's been awesome to watch Jay Wright, and to get to experience another coach that has figured himself out. And we've had a lot of winning over the last 3 years, but we've also had some challenges, but there's a consistency to Villanova basketball that I know is going to be steadfast throughout all the different changes. And we just lost 4 guys to the NBA draft. You know what I mean? And it's not dramatically changing the way that we're doing things. Yeah, you got to tweak it and you got to rethink your roster and everything like that. But the core elements of his philosophy are so proven and tried and true that we're going to be in good shape. We may not win every game, but the underlying culture will be the same, and that's hard to do, man. There's only a few Jay Wrights running around, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Well, Mark, this has been an excellent conversation. I think there are a number of things from our discussion that can help people understand why it's important to go through that self-discovery process. I really appreciate you joining us here on One Question.
Anytime, Ty. Anytime. I appreciate it, buddy.
That was Mark Jackson. He's the Director of Athletics at Villanova University, and this is Ty Brown with One Question. And keep in mind, the role of a leader is to create and maintain an environment that people want to be a part of. And as always, be better tomorrow than you are today. This episode of One Question is produced by Spades Media Group, solving problems using creative leadership.